beautiful ease and funny humor and and see right through these garbage lines that they're trying to sell people, you know?
So I want to get into, since it's been a few days, this chapter, because actually, weirdly enough, timing wise, this chapter is about the Middle East. It is called Fatwa and Richard Helms, and it talks about a lot of the underneath stuff that we're seeing manifested today. So it's kind of weird. And then we will spend our open mic time talking a little bit about Syria if you guys have any questions about that. So, this chapter deals with what was going on in the United States as well as in the Middle East, in Iran, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE as it relates to oil. And it starts off with the 1993 oil crisis under President Nixon. So it says Nixon survived the Saudis show of force with manipulating oil prices. So first of all, let me clear up some stuff for you guys. All of Saudi Arabia and Aramco and BP and Iran, the oil companies are not ran by these governments. They're ran under concessions of the West. So there's a misnomer, especially back in the 70s, that there was a shortage of oil and it was all the Middle East fault. Well, now that we've done the research and we know how the oil and the international syndicate works, what the better way to couch that information is the international syndicate was attacking both Nixon and Carter with oil prices because there never was a problem with oil. And one of the kind of, you know, when we come across stuff and I kind of have a question in the back of my mind, I articulate that question, and generally we will come back a few weeks later after doing more research and have our own answer. So one of the things that I find most interesting about the whole oil conversation and the pipelines, which is obviously the problem with Syria right now, is they want to finish a pipeline that they already had told us that they're willing to spend $2 trillion to finish. But they could never do it because it went across Syria. So if you think about it, you have our oil industry has Texas oil barons. And all of these Texas oil barons own parts of the oil industry, companies like Texaco and stuff like that in America. And then those Standard Oil, all of those others own concessions around the world. So what I find interesting about this, and I'm still kind of formulating the reason why in my head, is that these oil barons wanted to not use American oil because they were making money off of concessions that they had in other countries. And those that had bought into and were running the Saudi oil under Aramco, or like I said, BP and Dutch shale oil, which we talked about when we did Indonesia, how they had a 60-40 split with Standard Oil to take all of that oil. And so the whole time that they're going around the world harvesting other people's oil, we're sitting on a ginormous supply of oil, and we don't need to do that at all. And so there's almost a starving off of our own population from good jobs, because one of the reasons they did that is because the labor in all of these other countries were pennies on the dollar compared to the labor here to take our own oil out. So That's another thing that I recently discovered, and you guys can read that post that I made earlier this morning. A lot of this had to do with the unions. A lot of us felt that because we had unions and our companies went and worked around the world in other places, there was and there was union presence in the other places, but what we didn't know is that there there was no union presence as far as the workers goes in these other places. So what I did this morning in researching this harebrained idea I had at 4 a.m. in the morning, um, about the role the unions were playing is basically because we would read articles that says there were union people in Venezuela, there was union people in Chile, there was union people in Nicaragua. And I think that was by on purpose that we were supposed to believe that there were, if United Fruit had union workers here, they had union workers there. If PepsiCo had union workers here, they had union workers there. That was not ever the truth. The presence and the training of the union activists in these other places was to call anybody that actually tried to set up a union a communist, and to thwart any unionization of the pennies on the dollar labor down there so that the international syndicate oligarchs could make much bigger profits by offshoring all of our industry. And one of the amazing things, do you know that the IRS gives US oil companies depletion credit tax breaks for harvesting foreign oil? That was mind-blowing to me. So when we talk about the destabilization and the quote unquote oil crisis in the 70s, I want you guys to reframe that in your brain to understand that that was our own government attacking us, because our US oil companies owned the concession and was basically telling us that it was those people over there that was keeping the oil, and they were artificially inflating the price when it was them the entire time. So just understand that. So the collusion between Iran, Iraq, and Saudi and the UAE and doing all of this created basically an opportunity where the CIA was using many of these oil companies as an intelligence platform. So they embedded themselves in many of these international oil companies. And it basically says in 1974, a guy by the name of Walter McDonald, among senior CIA officers, had spent very serious amounts of time researching Saudi Arabia. The Israelis had been, remember, because they had the special relationship with Angleton, and so the US CIA, according to these CIA officers, was saying that basically they relied on Angleton to bring all of the intel, and that was primarily due to Angleton basically shutting everybody off. So that's kind of what they used. And they talked about the CIA's use of the Saudi GID, which is their intel apparatus, and the Shah's SAVAK, SAVAK. And remember, the SAVAK was set up by General Schwarzkopf's dad, Major General Norman Schwarzkopf Sr. And so those two apparatuses in the Middle East were becoming, because Angleton is gone, and they were becoming the new conduits for information, one for the Shias and one for the Sunnis. So because they didn't have inside information on Egypt or Iraq, they were kind of getting filtered information, is the best way to say that. And Richard Helms is still the ambassador to the Shah for the US. And remember, was the CIA director. So you also have in Iran at the time, with Richard Helms as the Iranian US ambassador, you had Richard Secord. Now, of course, we're going to find Helms and Secord in the Iran-Contra about 10 years later. But they were in the middle of this entire Middle East mess. So, and we talked last time about J.J. Kapushi, who owned a company that was doing a lot of the training for Edwin Wilson, and he was training Anwar Sadat's personal bodyguards. He also was involved in the Muslim Brotherhood and training for them as well. There was a man by the name of Saeed Ramadan, and he basically was going to be in Egypt the new leader of the Muslim Brotherhood element. And he was looked at as a father to the Islamic Revolution in Iran. He operated prior to the Ayatollah Iranian Revolution. He had been exiled by the Shah and was in Geneva, Switzerland, because that's where apparently all the criminals hang out, and bankers, which is kind of synonymous. No offense, War Hamster. Ramadan, the guy, should have had enormous interest to U.S. intel, but for some reason, they didn't seem at all interested. Now, if you understand what we know now, we know that the CIA and MI6 specifically was intricately involved in the Muslim Brotherhood. So while these guys may think that the CIA was not interested, MI6 was basically the backing to the Muslim Brotherhood. So the CIA and the MI6 knew very, very much exactly what the Muslim Brotherhood was up to at any one time. So during this time, in the late 1970s, around 78, there were cells of the Muslim Brotherhood that was being exported to the United States, and they were going to begin operating here, much like the Cuban exiles did. In 1979, Ramadan was routinely traveling back and forth from an Islamic Center mosque in DC to Geneva, Switzerland. And again, in order to do that, even back then, you could not do that without the State Department knowing, because you have to have visas. And especially someone, now keep in mind, the CIA's running Iran, right? The Shah's their buddy. So if the Shah exiled somebody, it's likely they exiled him, the CIA knowing he was exiled, right? So they're in the process. They're working this collectively together in Iran. So they know where he's at in Geneva, Switzerland. And they would know because he has to have a passport visa to come to the United States. So there's no way they don't know. They know he's traveling back and forth because he has to have permission to do that. So he starts looking around to try to recruit in the United States. Well, it just so happens that this is the beginning of looking for the African American community and enticing disgruntled Blacks into the Muslim religion. And they did it through several mosques, but this one Islamic center in Washington, D.C. was one of the hotbeds. And they also began grooming them at places like Howard University. And it talks about this one particular guy by the name of David Theodore Belfield, Belfield. He was originally from North Carolina. He was Black. He attended, he eventually attends, he went to New York, and then he goes to Howard University, which is a known hotbed of CIA recruitment. We'll just say that. And and it says that he met a Korean War deserter there while he was there, but it never does identify who that guy is, likely a CIA guy, that basically befriends him. So David Belfield becomes Dawood, Dawud, Salahuddin. That's going to be his new Islamic name, Salahuddin. And so Dawood Salahuddin, that's a crazy name, is going to get radicalized. And he basically becomes a mentoree of a guy by the name of Hamas Abdul Khalis, Chaalis. And while Malcolm X is making pilgrimages to Africa, there is a guy by the name of Elijah Muhammad, who they refer to as a crooked televangelist. And these three all kind of get on the bad side of each other. So Khalis, the Khaalis guy, was a family man, but they're basically running these operations, which is why you know they're intel. They were running these operations like a mafia group. And they get sideways with each other. And a group out of Chicago comes to Philadelphia, and then they recruit another radical cell of Islamists in Philadelphia, which is like a stay behind hit squad. They travel down to Washington, D.C. and go to Khalis's house while him and his wife are gone. His kids are there, and one of his daughter's 3 little kids are there. And these people massacre all of these kids in the house in Washington, D.C. And Khalis basically looks to this Dawud Salahuddin guy for help. And it says that they all basically, it was his epiphany, this American guy that they're trying to radicalize, this Dawud Salahuddin, that the entire thing's being ran like a mafia. So Khalis, on March 1977, took a small group to the Israeli headquarters in Washington, D.C. of the ADL. And basically holds people hostage. And it says councilman and future mayor Marion Barry was shot during the takeover of this ADL facility. And so there's basically an Islamic war at this point going on between the Washington, D.C. branch and the Chicago branch, just like the good old mafia days. And we had 2 cops in D.C., one by the name of Carl Schoffler, Schoffler, and Bill Cagney, who begin looking into what the hell is going on. And weirdly enough, even though it's dealing with transnational gang-like activity, no one in the federal government in Washington, D.C., where mass murder just happened, is at all interested. That's another telltale sign that you're dealing with the CIA. So Saeed Ramadan was a lawyer in Geneva. And he also was a CEO of a company that was based out of Switzerland as well. And Helms and his CIA buddies out of Iran basically were paying the mullahs prior to the revolution for years as a token of them not objecting to the Shah's reign in Iran. So basically, they were there to shovel out dollars to anyone in Iran to placate them, to put up with the Shah, who they were using for many different reasons. But basically, oil and access to the building of pipelines. And in the northern area of Iran, they were running drugs. There's lots of opium in the northern area of Iran. So that's all going on in the 70s. And you had this Ramadan guy coming back over to the US. And it says, I want to read this part here because this is very interesting. It says, the Shah's regime had become so detached from the people in the most extreme of the mullahs, a man that had been in exile first to Iraq and then to Paris. Now keep that in mind because that's NATO. Had begun organizing cells in Iran that offered poor and disaffected people education and health care. The Shah's vacuum of leadership among the poor had been filled with tape recordings of this particular mullah smuggled back into Iran to radicalize them. And that person was the Ayatollah Khomeini. So the Imam, Ayatollah Khomeini, was basically living unobstructed in Paris, right under the nose of the French Italian. So you can't tell me that this is not an entire CIA operation because I'm not going to believe you. The Imam, Ayatollah, called for a meeting in Paris, and they were going to spend $5 million to recruit African Americans to their cause, basically going to create radical Islamists among the American population. Now, again, these guys who's writing this book are CIA agents, not the technical author, but he's doing it off of their paper. So it's making it appear that while these three officers may not know the machinations that were going on to pay behind the scenes the Ayatollah, we do know even after the revolution that the Ayatollah worked very closely with the CIA. So it's not off target to think that the working with the CIA may have happened a lot sooner, to include creating a new version of the Cuban exiles, because at this point they're getting a little old, and you can recruit radical Islamists in terror cells inside the United States using someone like the Ayatollah or this Ramadan guy. So back to the Islamic Center in Washington, D.C., you have, it became a battleground, a civil war between the two groups where violence erupted routinely, and the DC police began taking pictures to identify who all of the people were at these demonstrations. Well, this Dawood Salahuddin guy, the convert, was in a lot of the pictures. And so still, they can't get any help from the FBI or the CIA or anybody else in trying to identify this. And the violence at the time was getting crazy. So you have Saeed Ramadan had assigned another guy by the name of Bahram Nahidyan. I'm going to spell his name Bahram. His last name is Nahidin. And they were in charge of recruiting in the US. And they would bring them to Washington, D.C., and a couple of other places to basically train them. And the Dawood Salahuddin was a perfect recruit because he had an older brother that was a New York cop. And so he would have been one of the least suspected guys. And it says that they initially, in order to monitor Dawood and kind of put him through the paces for trustability, he begins teaching an Islamic religion education class at Lorton Reformatory Penitentiary, which is right down the road from where I lived in Northern Virginia, which is just crazy. So Nahidyan arranged for a job for Dawood at the Iranian interest section in the Algerian embassy. So this David Belfield, who turns into Dawood, began working undercover, basically as a spy, in the Algerian embassy. So they are now going to start in 1978 recruiting 10 African Americans to train them as assassins to operate off of Khomeini's orders inside the United States. At 29, Dawood was going to be the leader that he had originally joined the Muslim religion to become. So there is Dawood gets deeply involved in several of the mosques, one in Brooklyn, the one in DC. And basically, these are all of the ones that would be later affiliated with Al-Qaeda, which of course we know is also CIA. So on November 4th, the same day of the Iranian Revolution, where the quote unquote students took over the US Embassy in Iran, this guy, Dawood, climbs up on the Statue of Liberty and unwraps a banner from the crown of the Statue of Liberty. It got almost no visibility at all because the only thing that was in the news for the next several weeks was the hostages in the US Embassy in Iran. But it was clearly another test. And so the cops that are in Washington, D.C. are going, what the hell? Because they've identified Dawood out of pictures that they have of the unrest in Washington, D.C. as one of the guys involved in the incident in New York City. So Dawood, as a result of this, gets promoted to be Nahidyan's personal bodyguard. So Nahidyan's activities was primarily at the Islamic House in Washington, D.C. There, they provided room and board for all of the Black recruits that they were transitioning over to the Muslim radicalization. And they focused mainly on Muslim student associations at campuses all over. And at the time, this is a crazy number. In the late 1970s, there were 50,000 Iranian students in the United States studying at different colleges. So there was a lot of Muslim student associations. In July of 1979, a guy by the name of Yusuf Allon, Allon, his American name was Joe, was the Israeli Air Force attaché to the Israeli embassy in Washington, D.C. He was shot and killed outside his home in Washington, D.C. The D.C. detectives believed that Islamic fundamentalists had penetrated uniformed Secret Service and was responsible for protecting diplomats like Alan. In 1980, Islamic fundamentalists sprayed the home of Norman Carlson, the director of the U.S. Bureau of Prisons, with machine gun fire. The war was on. And it goes on to talk about the method of financing these activities became very curious. A federal drug investigation revealed that a guy by the name of Michael Bakhtiar, Bakhtiar, who was the son of a late general, had actually become involved in a scheme to import heroin into the United States and use the money to overthrow the U.S. government. When Bakhtiar was arrested in the heroin scheme, a pen register trap on his phone revealed calls to and from Richard Helms in Iran, who's part of the CIA. Bakhtiar's lawyer happened to be Ramsey Clark. He never called Helms as a witness to determine if his client was part of a CIA plot to overthrow the government. His silence got Bakhtiar a light sentence. So one of the ex-CIA employees who had befriended Bakhtiar was named Donald Desalia. Desalia seemed to move with ease among both sides of the Iranian power struggle. I'm telling you, the entire thing is a CIA op. The spokesperson of the pro-Shah forces was Ali Akbar Takatabe, who was the former press attaché at the Iranian embassy in Washington, D.C. Dawood and others from the Nahadian Mosque group, called the Council of Consultation, warned Tabatabai that his activities against the Islamic government of Iran would lead to his death. These warnings didn't silence him. Tabatabai was a rarity among the Shah's officials, most of whom retired to places like Geneva to live comfortably after the government was overthrown. Dawood's Dawood's commitment to Iran was hardened when a handful of African American Marine Guards were released among several female hostages by the quote unquote students in Tehran. Again, I'm going to say this throughout this entire thing. This was a CIA op. So the CIA is in America recruiting Blacks to be Muslims in order to radicalize them and put them in terror cells inside the United States and to be deployed outside the United States. And there's zero coordination to reaffirm their commitment to Islam in the United States by releasing the Black prisoners in Tehran. Hello, nobody believes that. Dawood saw that as a sign of respect for Blacks. On his visits to Washington, Syed Ramadan began using Dawood as his personal assistant and secretary. Dawood kept up communications with him as Ramadan traveled the world. Dawood began to see Ramadan as his mentor. One day in early 1979, a call from Richard Helms from his and the Shah's old school buddy, General Hossein Fardust, Fardust, who was the former head of the Savak. The revolutionaries were deposed to believe that Fardust might be useful to them because the Shah had targeted him in 1995 as a suspected Soviet agent. After a period of detention, Fardust saw the utility of changing sides and agreed to head a new Islamic government intelligence agency. It was called Savama. Savama. The new Iranian government was desperate to open up weapons deliveries from anyone willing to sell weapons to them, including the United States. Fardas told his new supporters that he believed an arrangement could be made with President Carter, arms in return for the release of the hostages. According to Dawood Salahuddin, Fardas became the go-between for the arms negotiations. On the American side, Helms was selected by Carter to be the liaison. 2 months after the contact with Helms, it was arranged for Fardas to come to the U.S. on a quote-unquote unofficial visit. Fardas did not tell Helms that he had been the reason for his trip beyond an attempt to improve relationships with Washington. He was on a mission to prove his loyalty to the new Iranian revolution. According to a Iranian official who is now a regional governor in Iran, and therefore it was obvious that he needed to remain anonymous. Fardas had to prove that one of the Shah's former henchmen could be loyal to his new religious master. In May 1979, Fardas carried the fatwa and a religious order for several assassin targets in the United States. Now, again, under the premise that this is CIA to CIA, this still all makes sense, right? Tabatabai was first to be warned to end his collaboration with the United States. He was to be verbally warned 3 times. If he didn't heed these warnings, he was going to be executed. For the 49-year-old Tabatabai, the threats were very real. He appeared on the McNeil-Lehrer NewsHour to discuss them. His daughter Tiffany, then a congressional page, received threats against her father in her office. Tabatabai was not only a spokesman for the Shah, he was also one of the key plotters in an ill-fated counter coup. So Batar had raised money through heroin sales and was orchestrating basically a separate regime change. In the spring of 1980, again, he went back on the McNeil-Lehrer program, which, guys, that's even suspect to me. Tabatabai publicly discussed the plans to bomb key Iranian targets, including the parliament and Khomeini's house. The fact that an exiled Iranian was sitting in front of a television telling you that they were going to coup the Iranian government is crazy. When the coup was discovered, you just talked about it on television. A secret Islamic court issued a fatwa and arrest warrants for more than 1,500 plotters. Salahuddin, his introduction into the shooting war came very gradually. His first assignment was to firebomb a pro-Shah newspaper office in Washington, D.C. In early June, Salahuddin was a hardened soldier of Islam. To Salahuddin, a fatwa was the highest level order given. When Fardas relayed a fatwa against Tabatabai, Salahuddin understood that he could not turn it down and remain in Islam. Salahuddin was willing to die for Allah. He also remembered thinking that the embassy spokesperson was too small of a target. He suggested someone like Henry Kissinger. Dawa Salahuddin's training took over from his religious fervor. He loved the Robert Redford motion picture 3 Days of the Condor. It was from the film that Dawa borrowed his assassination scenario. At 11:45 on Tuesday, July 22nd, 1980, a young medical student named Mortazavi, who worked at Talatibi's, answered the doorbell at an upscale address in Bethesda, Maryland. And Mortazavi was understandably suspicious given the threats against Talatabi's life. But his suspicions waned when he saw a postman's truck in uniform. The postman said only Allah Akbar Talatabi could sign for his certified mail. He was holding several thick envelopes. When Talatabi came to the door, the postman did not offer him a clipboard. Instead, he looked at him straight in the eye and pressed the trigger 3 times at point blank range. The seconds played out in slow motion. The look of surprise on Talatabi's face when 3 9mm bullets tore through his stomach, the way the dust, like a dust from his blood, basically made it look like dust. We locked eyes, and I could tell he was dead before he hit the ground, Dawad said. The operation was planned perfectly. Dawad had gotten his weapon from a group of Muslims who were contemplating financing a takeover of an army base in Virginia with a series of bank robberies. He had gotten the mail truck by bribing a postal worker, and another man recruited by Dawa assisted in wiping the fingerprints off the truck. Now, there's a couple of things about this that's important. Using bank robberies to pay for missions like this, again, is another thing that the CIA did with their agents. And that's actually Operation Gladio. That was done a lot over in Europe as well. Dawad returned to Nahidian's Islamic house to change clothes and begin his exile from his own country. He flew under a phony name and passport, first to Montreal, then to Geneva, and finally to Tehran. The inability of authorities to stop Dawad's escape, combined with his series of miscues, left the prosecution of the conspirators in ruins. Only one man, peripheral to the conspiracy, served serious time in jail. Dawad became a suspect. Nahidian told the media that he was not involved. Islam does not allow you to go ahead and kill someone unless the Islamic court approved it, he was to say, which of course it did because he brought the fatwa from Iran. Dawad said Nahidian never mentioned the fact that the Islamic court had issued a fatwa. To Dawad's shock, when he reached the Iranian embassy in Switzerland, he was not welcome with open arms at all. In fact, the foreign minister, a guy by the name of Sadeh Gatbathe, in Tehran, refused to issue him an entry visa. Now desperate, Dawad's contacted Saeed Ramadan. Ramadan was furious at Dawad for carrying out the assassination. He thought it was foolish and unnecessary. He called Imam Khomeini's son, Ahmed, and then Gatsbatsa, who overruled Said Dawa. At the Geneva airport, which is divided between Switzerland and France, Dawad felt vulnerable. But even though he saw customs officials reading newspaper stories featuring his picture, they somehow never did anything with him. He boarded a late night flight to Iran, accompanied by a woman with connections to the highest level of Khomeini. The Iranian air flight arrived in Tehran at 3 a.m. A security detail of 3 cars was waiting for him. He was whisked into a Cadillac Seville. In the back seat were 2 men with Uzi machine guns. Another guy was in the passenger seat. They went straight to the foreign ministry for a one-on-one meeting. The 30-minute conversation was strained, but the guy who had first refused him entry now told him that any and all of his needs would be taken care of. Dawad would not learn until much later that the guy that met him, was a CIA agent. Dawood also did not know that he was not supposed to ever make it to Tehran. What had saved him was his relationship with Saeed Ramadan. After the meeting, two of the security men drove Dawood around the city for about 2 hours, then delivered him to a safe house. The lavish guest compound just outside of Tehran was the Safak headquarters, which was ran by the US CIA. On his first morning in the compound, he listened from his bed to Voice of America broadcast announcing that he had escaped to Tehran. He wondered why he had not been arrested, if the US government knew where he was. The Iranians had made no announcement. When Washington decided to broadcast this information, fed to them by the Iranian foreign minister, they were all but signing the CIA officer that met him's death warrant. The foreign minister's initial refusal to allow him entry had started a massive investigation into possible U.S. agents among high-level members of the revolution, because they were there. Fardust and others came under suspicion of being on the CIA payroll. The edge that Richard Helms and the CIA thought they had purchased over the years with the payments to the Iranian clerics disappeared overnight. That's the end of that chapter. Isn't that crazy?
Oh my God. And there's digging, okay, while you were...
It's absolutely crazy. And they just, you said that they associate or affiliate with a bunch of, con men or robbers and stuff like that, which kind of goes back to the OSS days.
Yes.
The stay behinds, because that you said that that's how they used to piggyback off of the mafia.
Yes. Very good, Stellar. Go ahead, Bridget.
Oh, just that guy that you were just talking about, that Dennis, Denesselya, okay?
Yeah, that guy.
You just go into that guy, just that one guy. He is linked to all sorts of nefarious stuff going all the way back to Oswald, ironically.
Well, read some of it.
Well, I posted up in the pill.
Okay.
1980 heroin bust called a CIA setup, where Densila said Bakhtar then became more secretive about his activities and ignored warnings not to deal with the CIA. By the summer of 1979, Bakhtar was meeting CIA contacts on the deal to import heroin to help overthrow the revolutionary regime and install his cousin, Shahpur, in power.
So they had adopted a Chiang Kai-shek model of revolution, right? Pay as you go using heroin. Wonder where they got that idea from.
Right. And so anyway, he ended up, the CIA contact who was to find Bakhtar a safe buyer for the heroin was another Iranian. I mean, you can just see how and it goes all the way through the Drug Enforcement Agency.
They were all corrupt. Yep.
Yep. And he ends up taking the fall, so he must have, let's see, today Bakhtar sits in Petersburg, Virginia, Federal Correctional Institute, serving a 15-year sentence for heroin trafficking. But that's just one example. The other one, like I said, in his case, that one man also goes linked back to, he just so happens to be, let me get to it.
While you're finding that, I do want to point out to people who are part of these operations, what we have discovered is, even though they may get arrested, they are kept in a luxurious, sometimes, not all the time, area of the jail cells, like the mafia. If you guys go to visit any of the jails, like in the New York area, the Philadelphia area where they kept notorious mafia people. They have their own cell located completely different than all of the rest of the cells. And basically, in the case of the one we were in Philadelphia, it was right next to a like a an efficiency kitchen where he had a guy come in and fix all his meals. He didn't even eat with the regular prison people. So just because they get quote unquote time, and in some cases, we found in Europe, while they're registered as a prisoner, they're coming and going and no one says anything because, and they were committing crimes, but then the lawyers would go, well, it could have been him. He's in prison, but he was walking out the back door. Go ahead.
He was also quoted as an observation that was further corroborated by former CIA operative Donald, I can never say his name, who was added during his employment at the agency in the early 1960s. The CIA regularly used faculty positions at Georgetown University as covers for many of covert operations personnel.
What?
Yeah.
They had CIA posing as professors? Where have we seen that before?
Right.
And
this guy is just rich. He pops up like a bad penny everywhere.
As so many of them do.
Right. And again, back to let's see, on a PBS thing having to do with Oswald, the narrator says, one former CIA officer, however, says he read an agency debriefing of Oswald in 1962. Donald, whatever his name is, agreed to be interviewed only in shadow. He quoted as, I received across my desk a debriefing report. It was a debriefing of a Marine defector. He was recently returning with his family from the Soviet Union. So anyway, he goes through all about how he was working in Minsk. He signed off on the CIA officer by the name of Anderson. And he goes on to talk openly about how, oh yeah, we knew all about Anderson and Oswald and how we were all in control of him. And what does that tell you? You know? However, after that, all the CIA said, no, we don't. He's full crap. No, we didn't.
Backtrack. Then that guy finds himself in a trash can somewhere.
Right. And that's just the one guy.
Yeah.
You can grab one guy. I mean, you could write books on each of these people and how they turn up like a bad penny in every single oddball, terrorist situation or training situation or.
Well, that's just like today when I did that thread earlier about the union's involvement in paramilitary coups, all that stuff, in being the foot soldiers in Latin America. Where did it take me? Right to, and they actually even used the words, took me to the Brazilian coup with Jim Jones, who was part of the Brazil coups, which we found out when we did our research on Jim Jones. And so the Brazilian coup was kicked off by Union foot soldiers trained at a Union school in Washington, D.C. for that purpose in Latin America. And it just so happens that the author of the article that I was reading mentioned Brazil and then goes on to mention that, Jim Jones, because of course that would have been a sensational piece to the whole news story that Jim Jones was in Brazil at the same time, later of Guyana fame. Which weirdly enough, Guyana, when they overthrew that president, used AFL foot soldiers that had been trained in Washington, D.C. And Jim Jones actually spent time in Guyana during that time. I'm sensing a pattern.
Oh my God. And it's just, it's more, it's more than just a pattern. It's like you're knitting a rug. It's just continuous. It's a continuous, intentionally woven together and woven back upon itself.
It's a plan. It's what we call an operational plan, an O plan. It's a plan. It's a plan they execute over and over and over again.
Exactly.
All right. Does anybody have anything that they want to come up and chat about? If you guys wouldn't mind resharing the space, I'd appreciate it.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
What do you think about the South Korea thing and the true to vote?
Don't be shy, guys. Ask for Mike.
The true the vote. Do you have that post?
I did. I will have to find it. But it was, they were saying that there was the whole thing having to do with the military rule in the presidency going on in South Korea was election interference. And I just didn't know if you had seen anything about that.
I actually said something. I wanted you to read the post though.
Oh, yeah, I'll find it. Give me just a minute.
Okay. Yeah, because that's definitely something that's good to talk about. I also just want to briefly let's see who we got here.
Colonel, while you're waiting for other people to put their hand up, I wanted to point out a fun little connection.
Okay.
So part of this had to do with the DEA. And fun little factoid, we've talked a lot about Shackley, who left the Asian theater in 1973. And I recently mentioned on X about Joseph Burkholder Smith when he flew down, when Shackley came, back to the American continent. All the CIA people were re-interviewing for their jobs, and Burkholder Smith flew down to Argentina and found himself in a, shall we say, a Bavarian village of ex-Nazis. Well, what's interesting, people forget, what year was the DEA founded? Again, it's 1973. The first founder, chief of the DEA was a guy by the name of John Bartels Jr., who had to resign in disgrace under a lot of scrutiny. You can just even go to his wiki page, and you have people like Charles Rangel talking about how corrupt the DEA was, and how even Congress and let me read a quote, "There are a great number of people who regard narcotics agencies as corrupt Nazis who don't know how to open the door except with the heel of their right foot." And that was a quote in Playboy magazine way back when.
Do you remember the name of the Nazi village they went to?
I'd have to look it up.
Let me tell you what is it, Bridget? Colonnade? What is the name of that one?
I cannot remember. Sorry.
All right. It's something Colonnade. That village was set up by a child pedophile over in Germany who came to whatever country it was in South America. I get them all confused.
Colonial Dignidad.
Yeah, there you go. And that colony had basically the very first stay behind, because the entire basement was filled with weapons. And they also used one of the rooms in the basement as a torture cell as part of Operation Condor. So the DEA, as I said, and as a matter of fact, I think it's a misnomer to think that most of the people in the DEA are actually DEA agents. They are not. They are CIA infiltrators who allow drug investigations to go a certain extent, and then they are turned off, because anything further than that would jeopardize the CIA's total control over the drug network. And the only busts the DEA is allowed to make are the ones the CIA view as predatory or competitors. Because we found that as far back as the what was the BNDD? What was the thing before the DEA?
Customs Ambrose.
Yeah, I mean, they had infiltration from the CIA way before that. Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out the coincidence of everything that was going on in 1973. You know, you got Shackley coming back from the Asian theater, and you've covered that ad nauseum. So have I. You've got Nixon contemplating everything going on with Vietnam, Watergate. And we create the DEA at the exact same time. I'm sure these are all just pure coincidence.
Well, and in 72 was the mass attack on the Corsican mafia that moved all of their laboratory work, because they basically went in and killed them all. Over 350 Corsican mafias were murdered. So they could move the processing of the number 4 heroin down to Sicily. Was done in 72. So I'm sure that them coming back from Southeast Asia was basically job done, because they had transitioned the entire network over to the CIA.
I think it's just a coincidence. I'm being incredibly facetious and sarcastic.
I know you are.
That's all I've got to say tonight. I'll try to listen on the rest. I got some work to get done. Good night, everyone.
See you later. Bridget, go ahead.
And FEMA was also created or named at that time. Anyway,
oh, wait a minute. You're telling me that the U.S. version of the Phoenix program was set up at the same time?
Yeah.
Okay.
Coincidence, I'm sure.
Yeah, me too. Okay, go ahead.
But, now this was 4 days ago, from our source in South Korea, quote, finally the reason for martial law was found. The Secretary of Defense, who advised the president to declare martial law, officially said that it was to investigate the possibility a rigged election of the last election. It is officially confirmed that troops were sent to the headquarters of the National Election Commission right after the declaration of martial law. The president sent only more than 100 special soldiers to the Congress building, but he sent more than 300 special soldiers and also special intelligence agents to the National Election Commission building, where the data and server for the election is. According to some sources, it is being said that they got the clear evidence for the election fraud. The main goal was not to take control of the Congress, but the president wanted to get electoral data and server history to investigate the election fraud. It is very encouraging news. In Korea, the National Election Commission is a totally independent commission, so it is impossible to interrupt or invade them, even the prosecutor. So I think that why the president declared martial law, because it's the only way to get the evidence of election fraud from NEC headquarters. We are facing furious enemies, but I believe that the Lord is saying, rise up, man and woman of valor. The darkest hour is before the dawn. I believe we should never lose hope. Let's hope and faith, because he is our Redeemer and our protector. Please continue to keep the people in South Korea in our prayers. Now, since then, they have said, and I might have still got it. This is a direct source experiencing this live in South Korea. And this was 1 day ago, South Korea, Ireland, and now Romania, 3 countries in upheaval over their elections, all within the last few days. More, this week, France's government imploded over a vote of no confidence, and earlier this evening, Assad was run out of Damascus, with Islamic rebels having taken charge. With so much happening on the world stage, our incoming administration will need to be stronger than ever. May God bless the righteous freedom, fight for freedom.
Cousin It, I see you made comments on that. Where is she at? Holy crap. She cracks.
What?
I see her up here. There she is.
What?
You made comments on True the Vote's post?
Yeah, she's full of shit.
She's
absolutely full of shit.
So let me read Cousin It's post. The U.S. has been rigging elections in South Korea since its inception. If he's going after the servers, it's to hide his corruption, not anything else. He was installed by the U.S. in 2022. He would be up for re-election in 2027. The opposition party wants unification, and they want him out. Yeah,
Well, I only had 140 characters, so there it is.
No, that's very well said, and way more to the point than anything else that we're going to find. Just so that you guys know, I'm very suspect of True the Vote for many different reasons, but I'll just leave it at that. Carrie, go ahead.
Can I just jump in and say I've been on record of being suspect about them, and I've been attacked, and all those people that attacked me now know the truth. I backed off of that. It's just nothing ever came of it. And anyone who's tied to the Coach Mel is a suspect individual in the first place. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Okay, Carrie, go ahead.
Yes, so you're saying Khomeini is the CIA?
He allowed the CIA to operate inside of Iran. Yes, he did.
Well, doesn't that make him the CIA?
No, I mean, some people, some foreign heads of state can be collaborators without actually being CIA.
That makes no sense to me. I'm sorry. And why does Russia? I mean, Russia has to know that.
Well, but what was going on in the 70s is very different than what's going on today. So there's a lot of things that has changed, especially, you know, and that's why I'm very careful about saying if Khomeini is actually CIA, then he won't change. But there are people like Trump that takes advantage of opportunities to do things, even if you're doing things with people that you don't necessarily agree with 100% of the time. So,
Okay, can I explain something really quick? Or you need to say something more? Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I didn't mean to cut you off. So the thing about Iran is that they were Zoroastrian, and then they were taken over by the Arabs in a revolution. They were Persia, and they were made to become Muslims. So when they were made to do that, they chose to be Shia Muslims as a revolutionary act because, you know, this House of Saud is Sunni. And there's a whole big story behind all of that. But it was always thought, like in my circles or whatever, that basically what they're usually doing is making a revolution against the Sunnis all the time.
Well, they definitely don't get along. But that doesn't mean they're always at odds with each other, because they have collectively did things together against other people. That's why I'm saying
against the Jews or against
no, just other nations. That's why I'm trying to explain a very nuanced situation. When you're dealing, especially with Middle Eastern countries that are very much administered by, I'm just going to use this term, by strongmen. And they had a history of being basically tribal. So it's kind of, I'm standing on the top of the hill and I'm the king today. That doesn't mean I'm going to be the king tomorrow. But I also know that my standing on top of this hill is dependent upon me being able to outmaneuver everybody else that wants to be on the same hill. And in those cases, they will broker deals with anyone this side of the devil in order to make sure they stay on the top of the hill. And so you cannot go in with a Western viewpoint of, I'm only going to talk to people who have like values and everybody else is Satan and I can't deal with them, because that's not the way that area of the world works. You build coalitions, even the bad guys build coalitions in order to get their piece. So they will build an entire front just so they can get, and all they ever wanted was this little piece, but they'll build this big movement to get their little piece. And so just because he's sitting next to you working a deal today doesn't mean he's going to be anywhere near you tomorrow, because he can stab you in the back tomorrow.
Okay, one more thing. I just want to clarify that the Muslim Brotherhood are Sunni. Yeah, it's really confusing.
Well, the Muslim Brotherhood is a product of MI6. You can go back and look at the history of where it began in Egypt a long time ago, and it has some very similar characteristics of the Haggadah terrorist organization that was created by the UK in Israel. Very similar.
This is very difficult.
It's all very difficult. All along, go ahead.
Hi, Colonel, I just wanted to comment about, the last couple of days in Syria and this overall situation in the Middle East. Been going on for about 2 years now. It's what to me stands out is just how remarkable the U.S. Senate is right now. It's like there are 100 purported senators in this country. Israel is playing the icebreaker role of CIA for reshaping the world at the most perilous time since the Cuban Missile Crisis, if not more so. And we cannot get a single senator to comment on, disagreeing with any policy whatsoever. It is truly stunning that we are forcing kids to learn about the three branches of government when one of them is dead, the other is, a ghost since the assassination of JFK, and Senator Joe Biden literally made Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas. And it's just, I'm not sure really people realize the impact of this, complete death of the legislative branch on political discussion, because when the senators don't say anything, the journalists don't investigate anything, and kids hear nothing in school. There's a societal aspect to, debate, and when politicians are paid to not make any, it is a mind-numbing, it has a mind-numbing effect on society. And, the shooter of the CEO is the end result of that, the end result of zero reform from this dead branch. And it's like stunning to me that here we are on the verge of World War III with the U.S. pressing, using the Zionists as the icebreaker of CIA. And not a single word from the U.S. Senate. It's
okay. So let me
can't overstate this level of corruption. It's like beyond obedience.
Okay, so let me give credit where credit's due. Mike Lee did call out the entire thing, saying we're paying for both sides and it's completely unacceptable. And JD Vance did come out and say that while President Trump said it's not our fight, that we are basically paying for both sides of this, and the rebels are a offshoot of ISIS. So there has been a couple, and I did like his one post where he said, aside from that, opinions like the below make me nervous. The last time this guy was celebrating events in Syria, we had the mass slaughter of Christians and a refugee crisis that destabilized Europe. And he was mentioning Josh Rogan, who was making this dumbass statement about Syria being free and the rebels won, which of course we know they're not even rebels. They're just CIA trained terrorists that they've gathered up from all over the Middle East to bring in and do this. Zen, go ahead. Zen.
Hi. Yeah, I don't want to change the subject unless you want to.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, hi, Colonel. I have a question about the new president of Mexico and what she's all tied up with. And I know in the run-up to her election, there was like 28 people murdered that were running for office. I was wondering if you can address that situation and what you know about it. Thank you.
Sure. I made a couple of posts about that a while back. If you will allow me, I'm going to go find the information that I dug up on her. The people that were killed around that election were not in direct competition with her. I mean, collectively, all of them with her per se. But there was some really weird things going on about that. I just am not going to, like I said, I did a little bit of research, but I don't know what off the top of my head. But if you will give me till tomorrow, I'll make a note and go back and find my research on that. Benjamin, go ahead.
Thank you, Colonel. Hi, everybody. Saddam Hussein, he's a perfect example of the type of proxies they use. Seems like one tactic they use is they'll take the smallest group in a nation that they want to subvert, and they'll give them the support, they'll give them the power, the weapons, and stuff like that. You know, Saddam and his children killed thousands of people, so, you know, at that point, you kill thousands of another group, it gives you a little bit more incentive to stay in power and then, you know, have to do whatever you're told to do. Yeah. Thank you.
Sure. That's actually a pattern, if you will, with most of colonialism. If you go to the continent of Africa, one of the known tactics, primarily of French, but the British did it as well. The French became very good at it, where they would take the minority tribe that had been beat up for, you know, the last couple hundred years and put them in charge with the French army as their backup, while they went out and murdered in mass the majority that had been beaten up on the minority for the past couple of hundred years. The French stole all their resources. They took all their gold, they took diamonds, they took oil, they took rubber, whatever it was, for decades and decades. And when the early 1960s came and the freedom was breaking out all over the continent of Africa and people wanted their independence, and the French eventually had to pull out of many of their former colonies, whether they liked it or not, they left them in total chaos. Because then the majority people who had had family members mass murdered by the minority were pissed off as hell, and the French were no longer around to protect them. And that came around, and you guys may have remembered that story of a 3-star general that was sent on a UN mission to one of those prior French colonies that was found on a park bench in Canada several months after he returned, because he was eyewitness to an entire, like, hundreds of people being macheted to death by the majority. They just like hacked up all, like 200 or 300 people in a massacre. And he was never able to function again in life as a result of that. He suffered horribly, having been an eyewitness to the complete breakdown of society in the aftermath of France's colonial experience or experiment. So all along, go ahead.
Yeah, Colonel, I just wanted to point out something about, the IDF is literally using snipers to target children in Gaza. They're being used as the battering ram of U.S. expansionist policy in the Middle East. And it just seems to me as though the Zionism, is first of all being completely demonic now and paid for by our taxes. Demonic. That said, I think that there seems to be a psychological warfare strategy, at the top of U.S. government that is going to say, look, we can use Zionism as the icebreaker battering ram of, headache ball, whatever metaphor you want to use, to remake the Middle East, in the context of also what is going on with Ukraine and Russia. It's definitely a psychological warfare to minimize, through fear, the U.S. population's, resistance to this all-out, war machinations on the part of the duopoly, really. And it just seems to me that, Zionism is at once being demonic, and yet that very demonic nature, through insane degrees of propaganda around calling anyone who resists Israel domination of U.S. foreign policy and somehow anti-Semitic, is really serving the interests of the CIA. I mean, look at CIA control of Saudi Arabia and Egypt just in relation to Gaza alone. Without complete and utter CIA control of Egypt, Gaza doesn't happen, right? Because it's on the border. And, everywhere you look, it seems as though Zionism and the corresponding propaganda of anti-Semitism, which has been fully picked up by the U.S. media, is just having an utterly paralyzing effect on United States politics, and it's really, truly sick and dangerous. Sorry to cheer everybody up too much.
Thanks. Benjamin, go ahead.
Thank you, Colonel. That was a lot. The whole Syria thing, that blows my mind. One angle, I can't understand why Trump would say step back. That I thought we were leaning in the direction of, we're the ones that's been causing all the problems there. We should stay out and let Assad remain in power. The only thing that I can think of is, with all the mass migrations because of the war, maybe this is an incentive to say, like, hey, we're taking a step back. You guys can go back to your country, maybe like a peace offering. Does that make sense? Or
yeah,
I don't know.
Well, you have a lot of things going on there. Again, using the premise that the international syndicate understands that its days are limited, right? So 2 years ago, they started pumping hundreds of billions of dollars of equipment and all kinds of other stuff into Ukraine. We know for a fact that some of the resources associated with Ukraine has made its way to Syria. I don't think it's a coincidence that the Syrian ratcheting up and basically all out war, because, you know, prior to that, it was basically nipping around the edges, right? Almost to keep it under the radar, but keep Assad in check. The soon as the election was over, the doors flew open. They mass rushed everybody that they could find that had ever graduated from one of their Mujahideen terrorist camps into Syria and launched operations. And almost literally overnight, after they all got the logistics there, they're just knocking city down after city. So the hope, I believe, of the international syndicate, because keep in mind, if you guys watch that Breaking History show that Ghost and I did, we found the document and memorandum from the embassies in WikiLeaks data that said they had pledged to, they being the Middle East, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, all of them, $2 trillion to overthrow Assad so they could finish the pipelines in order to get oil to Europe to compete and cut Russia off. You can't do that if Assad, with Russia's support, is still in Syria. So even though Trump will come to office, they no longer have Assad. And as long as they can keep Assad out of Syria, they know that under the radar, they will be able to fly in every asset that they have to finish building out this critical pipeline that is another blow to the well-being of Russia. And we know that's what this is all about. It's ultimately going to be a regime change in Russia as well, after they've been able to financially destabilize it, which is what they've been hoping to do, except for everything boomerangs on them thus far as trying to bring Russia to heel. And so, does that make sense?
No, it does. It's a lot. I mean, for me, like, Russia's a nuclear armed nation. Like, we're playing in waters and things that are like, there's a lot at stake here. Like, why you would try to back somebody like that into a corner. I mean, just because it worked the first time doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work the next time. You know, I would be prepared for that strategically. Like, a lot of the things that we've done over time just make no sense strategically. It's just, you know, for the benefit of the few.
Well, that's the strategic goals we're trying to accomplish, Benjamin, not ours. It's their strategic goals, right? That's the whole purpose of the international syndicate. They're not there for us. None of the people in the government work for us. They work for the international syndicate. And so what I guess probably my most surprising takeaway of the, you know, months, years that we've been working on this project is the extent to which generals, when they thought they were talking classified conversations that have later been declassified, the extent to which military general officers were rabidly advocating nuclear attacks. So when you come to understand, I mean, even Johnson, these people have zero. It would be like someone going out to their cow pasture and shooting a few cows and taking them down to the slaughterhouse. That's the amount of thought they go into dead human bodies, as long as it's not theirs. They are an affront to humanity. as a matter of fact, because they just believe that we're using excess oxygen, and they've literally laden our food with poisons to kill us, the fact that they could do that a lot faster with nuclear weapons everyone needs to understand that's the level of mentality of the people that we're dealing with, that are in this syndicate, that they literally have no regard for human life. So you and I, when we think logically about certain situations, you discount some options because you just can't fathom somebody being that crazy. But they are that crazy. As a matter of fact, I think they're like 10 times crazier than any of us in this space tonight could even imagine. That's how crazy they are. And again, during the 6-Day War in 1967, when we did the book review of the for the USS Liberty, when I realized, and because I know the backstory of how this operates, when I realized that they had called the B-52 crews, that they were in their aircraft at the end of the flight line, engines running, fully loaded with tactical nuclear weapons in response to the 6-Day War aggression of Israel against Egypt. Egypt never touched Israel. Israel attacked Egypt. And then Israel, to erase the evidence of their attacking Egypt and the slaughter of several people that were already in custody, that there were discussions over radios about not realizing the USS Liberty had picked up all of those discussions. When that transmission got back to higher headquarters from the USS Liberty, the USS Liberty was attacked because those people that are the translators that had submitted those messages upstream were eyewitnesses to what had just happened. And whether or not, and I don't know, whether or not the sinking of the Liberty was to bring the United States in, and then they were going to launch the B-52s because they were going to accuse Egypt of sinking the USS Liberty, which is the allegation. That all could be. But again, there were nuclear armed submarines. The only thing that saved the USS Liberty, in my opinion, is the fact that there was a Soviet submarine that actually surfaced to let them all know they were there. And there was another witness, and they are not going to take out the Soviet nuclear sub. And therefore the whole thing had to be called off. The fact that we got to that point, I mean, there's meetings with the SAC commanders on other topics like Cuba, where they were all nuke happy as it related to Cuba too. So I'm that part of all of this is probably the thing that has dumbfounded me the most. And so because we came across that early on, I now know they're capable of literally anything. There's no brakes. This is a runaway steam engine going down a hill that President Trump jumped in front of the steam engine. And that's why a lot of people call him Batman. Carrie, go ahead.
Yeah, Colonel, I know you don't watch movies, but I really wish you would watch Dr. Strangelove, because it's just an echo of what you're saying, but worse. So I'm actually like a medical professional, and I've studied a lot of philosophy. These people are nihilists. So I know it sounds crazy, but it's real. They're interested in demolishing things. That's an interest of theirs. They like that.
Well, Carrie, let me interrupt you for just a second, because I do want to point out that what we found early on in this is in the, and I don't know the proper term, it's not satanic, but in the Gnostic mystic religion that a lot of these people adhere to, they do believe in reincarnation, and they believe that the quicker they kill you and you are allowed to ascend to your next self, that the closer, the more you do that, the closer to God you become. And they believe that every individual can be a God, and that the only way you do that is by ascending through death. So they literally think in many cases that killing you is actually doing you a favor.
I don't know anything about that.
I've read a lot about that.
That sounds like, is that kind of messianic? Is that what you mean?
No, that is not the actual. It has to do with Gnosticism, and there's another word. It was mysticism, Gnosticism, and one other ism. That
Zoroastrianism.
What is it?
Zoroastrianism.
Okay. They actually believe that and that's why they have no problem killing little kids, is because they're just speeding up their cycle to get them closer to God. Stellar, go ahead.
I was going to say that also because they also believe in spirituality and stuff like that. So when they talk about going from the third density to the fifth density, the fourth density is where these evil entities supposedly live. And when you're at a lower vibration, that's what they feed off of. So when people are in fear or sad, they feed off of that. I mean, Nazis, Hitler was really into that kind of stuff as well. That's where the girls or whatever, I can't remember what they were, but that's where part of that came from. So it's the fear. The other thing is the ones that I think that they are literally Satanists, because the truest, I mean, the closest to God are children, because they're full of love and light, and wonder. And these things they hate that so much that's another way for them to feed off of it, because of the energy or the light or whatever that's what they feed off of. They're literally, there's like succubus, or succulus or something like that, like they're energy vampires. There's different forms of them and stuff like that, and they really truly believe that. And the energy, fear, is what they live off of.
Yeah. Okay.
It's actually called loosh. LOOSH. They steal your loosh.
That's gross. Okay. Let's see. Do we have anybody else? I don't see any other hands up.
Carol DeLuca, I just brought her up. She had her hand up.
All right. While we're getting her connected, Trump Varg, are you doing your space tonight? Trump Frog? Probably caught him on.
As far as golfing, are you doing your space tonight? I don't know if you can hear us.
Yeah, he may be on a call or something. If you think we are, that's fine. Because that's going to be around 8:15. I do have to go after we get her. She's showing is not connected. I don't know what happened with her. I just show her with
may have to pull her down and pull her back up. Hang on.
Okay, because we need to get that, and then I've got to go because I'm going to have to get some dinner before we do our 8:15 show.
It'll be closer to 8:30.
Okay. Yeah, the later you go, the less I'm going to be there. I'm just teasing.
I don't plan on going very long.
You West Coast people.
There's too many lunatics on X right now. It's insane. I just would rather not deal with the nonsense. I do support you and I want to support your spaces, but people are just illogical. So I'm just not trying to have that energy in my life.
Well, we don't have to do it, Trump Frog. I'm fine with not doing it. This is like the third show I've done today, so it's totally up to you.
Well, if not, then let's do one tomorrow.
Tomorrow's great. Yeah, tomorrow's actually much better.
All right, we'll do it tomorrow then. I'll schedule it that way. It'll make it much better for both of us.
All right.
And I won't be in the office till 6:30 or whatever I got to do today as it is. So
Okay, that's perfect then. So
it works out all the
tomorrow.
way around.
Oh, and then what you guys were talking about, how the deep state and the international syndicate, how they rob everything. Well, I don't know if you guys have been watching the crypto markets today, but if you saw silver, it got up to almost $33 an ounce, or I know it got up there. And then you saw that the crypto markets, Bitcoin, everything crashed. Don't forget that they also printed out of U.S. Treasury, U.S. dollar Treasury, over $1 trillion that they put in there so that they could do their little maneuverings and stuff. So the flash sale was because that was them trying to gather up as much funds as they can before everything does actually switch. So don't be fearful. You guys were winning, and they're running out of money because it's literally, it's too much money to keep trying to maneuver and manipulate these markets. So the flash drop was because they are losing, just to let you guys know. So yeah, they're still robbing.
Okay. DeLuca, go ahead.
Hi, I came into this space late and I was going to talk about Loosh. Yeah, it's a very negative. Anytime you feel upset or angry, that is Loosh. And they're pulling the energy, the life force from you. It's almost like, remember the movie Cocoon, where the life force would be just pulled from these beings. And it's very demonic. And at night, I play various frequencies when I go to bed, positive frequencies, and they're hertz. You can do them on YouTube, and it just calms you and gives you these positive energies, and they hate it.
What are those frequencies, DeLuca?
If you, for instance, 1150 hertz, it's a beautiful, beautiful frequency. If you turn on YouTube, you go to YouTube 1150 hertz, and you can play that, and the tones are just beautiful, very relaxing. The hertz were changed. The music hertz were changed, I believe, from 432 to 440 by the Rockefellers in the early 1930s, 1940s, which threw off our body and our own human frequencies. And all the
chaos. It caused chaos.
Yes, and all the music agitates the body, whereas a 432 hertz is in line with nature. And if you study it, it's really incredible. You could do a whole space on frequencies, but look up frequencies and healing hertz, DNA repair hertz. There are all sorts of frequencies. Some of them I don't like the sounds of, but 1150 frequency, the hertz, is just beautiful. And I can fall asleep to it, and it's very peaceful. They hate it. The demons hate it, as we call them. Sometimes you feel really down. That's when your life force is being pulled from you, and it's called Loosh. So
and she's right. What they did is they studied that. That's part of what the Nazis did. It causes chaos, and it causes damage to our DNA as well. So these ones that she's talking about actually do help heal us from the inside by the frequencies.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay, Benjamin.
I love discussions about things like that. Those things that you can't see, like energy, how you vibrate, like how many of you have been in a room and some asshole walks in and just completely wrecks the vibration? Like, vibe really does matter. It's like that. I didn't miss any school. I never missed school unless I skipped or faked being sick. It's like I was always happy. It was easy for me. And part of the reason is because, I've almost died, several times in my life. But even as a kid, I almost died a few times. And then once you get to that point, you realize, like, hey, this is all a blessing. This is good, so why let silly things bother you? It's like you have to control your vibration. You have to control your energy. Like, I don't let anybody else affect me. Like, you can have a bad day. I can just leave. I don't have to be around you. And like, control what you can control. And that's one of those things. Like, your energy is important.
Got it. Carrie, go ahead.
Yeah, Colonel, you have to listen to the different ones that are on YouTube. I posted one in the film, but each individual is very different. And you just need to go through them and like see which one is good for you.
Okay.
Don't let people tell you like this one is the best.
Well, I don't want 440 evidently, because that's a bad one.
No, I
don't know
never.
about that.
Yeah, I never said it. You should do this. I just said one to try it out. There are various
No,
ones,
I
and you choose
wasn't
the ones.
saying
Yeah,
you were.
yeah.
I wasn't saying you were. I was just
She knows I don't know anything
Yeah.
about this stuff.
I was just trying to keep it open.
Yeah.
But also I want to say that anger isn't necessarily a bad thing. Like you need your anger. Sorry, but you have to have your anger.
Yeah, that's like somebody told me today, oh, did you know, they asked me if saying cuss words on X limited my reach. And I'm like, well, it doesn't matter, because I'm not going to pretend I'm somebody I'm not. And if that requires me to do that, then screw the reach, because I am who I am. So I'm not going to watch my words in order to increase my reach. I'm counting on each and every one of you guys that come here every day to do what you've been doing. It has made a tremendous amount of difference. You guys have shared all of the information. We grow by leaps and bounds every day, not like crazy when these other people have come on here and got hundreds of thousands of people. But that's not what it's about. I want people to read this information. I want them to pass the information on after they understand what's going on, after they do their own research, check their own references, and don't believe anything that we tell you. I want you all to do your own research. But I do think things like last Friday is very important, where you get independent researchers on that. Basically, the conversation that we had should have cemented in every one of your minds that the information that we're sharing is 100% legitimate, and it is the same information that many other independent researchers that think outside the box have come up with on their own as well. I was amazed at the knowledge, and Cousin It's kind of our booking agent, and we said afterwards that that means the world to me, as far as getting this information to you guys. And whenever we can find people that, it's not like we're screening them only the ones that agree with us. You saw that there were areas that we didn't necessarily see eye to eye on. We don't agree with him at all politically. But that's not what this is about. This is about getting the truth to people. And we're willing to talk to anybody about the truth. Hey, Cousin It, was it you or Bridget that found that lady the other night that wrote the book that I'm reading? Thy Will Be Done. What's her name? I have my book right here.
Oh, yeah. I know what you're talking about.
What was her name?
Gosh, shit.
The book's in
the pipelines, right?
Yeah, Thy Will Be Done is the book I'm reading about Nelson Rockefeller. The lady that wrote that book was
Charlotte. Don't look at it. Her dad was CIA, but that doesn't mean that the book is not amazing. I'm sorry.
Yeah, the book's amazing. And yes, she talked about her dad. And she was on a YouTube show that Cousin It sent me, and we were listening, and we were texting back and forth listening to her. Quite obvious that her and I don't agree on anything political at all. But unlike some other authors, you can read her entire book and not know anything about her political bent at all. Those are the best books. Those are authors that are doing their job researching stuff and not throwing in a political bias. Again, I'm still like halfway through that book. So you guys, I have got to go. Health, wealth, abundance. I'm going to let you go. And then Benjamin, I'll let you close it out.
Thank you, ma'am. I'm going to be quick. I just wanted to let you know how you doing, first of all. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for asking. I I just want to let you know that I love you so much. And that's not in a creepy way, but I just love your spaces. I love just your vibe, just the info that you've given. It just coincides with my mindset of what I always thought and believed. So thank you.
Well, thank you for being here, and thank you for coming up. You need to do that more often.
I know. I'll be on the road, and I don't want to be, I don't want to get too. I get anxious a little, Hey, Stella. Hey, Trump. Hey, And I just want to let you know, Miss Karen, you keep doing what you're doing. You are on to it. It's like when I watched that show Lioness on Paramount. And see it, the CIA is like, wow. It's like when you was reading, I felt like I was watching that. I'm tuned in. Keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you.
God bless you.
Thank you.
Blessings to everybody here. Thank you.
That's some of them good vibes. You must be on the 1150 hertz frequency.
Yes, ma'am. I'm shout out to her for bringing that up because I am. I'll be on 432, 1150. Yeah, I stay on that right frequency. I hate bad energy. And
awesome.
When I walk in the room and people don't have that right energy, I just go the other way. Hey, they going through something that's not my Yes, ma'am. I'm in the DMV area, so I know I'm coming from Richmond now on my way to through DC, and then I got to go to Baltimore Lab. I'm working all day.
Oh, God bless you. I was in that area for 6 years. I do not envy you at all.
Yes, ma'am. But I'm up and down the road. I'm going through it all. I'll come through Bethesda. I come through Chantilly. I'm coming through it all every day. So yes, ma'am. Keep doing what you're doing. I ain't gonna hold you. I know you want to go eat. Peace and blessings to you, and stay how you are. I just love your vibe. Okay.
Thank you, Benjamin. Go ahead.
You're welcome.
Close us out.
That was awesome. I'll end with perspective. That's something we all need. We could all use a little more perspective. Like challenge your beliefs, challenge why you think what you think, why you do what you do. Like that can only make you better. And as far as the cuss words and your reach, Colonel, cuss words are cuss words. I guarantee you there's probably nobody in here that can tell us why all these particular words that we consider cuss words
I know
are bad. Like I'm a sailor, that's our culture, that's our environment, and we use all different kinds of cuss words, and it isn't necessarily a bad thing.
They're just words and they convey meanings.
Exactly. Like I fucking told you, like it's the purpose behind what somebody's trying to articulate, the true meaning behind it. Don't just take the word, because words are, one way that divides us, like for me, there's no reason why we can't work anything out if we're both trying. We're both not going to get what we want, but that's what the world needs more is people working together instead of
compromise. Yep, I agree. All right.
I was going to say one last thing is probably an Operation Gladio thing that they made they said all these words are actually bad. In reality, they're probably the best words you could ever say. We should be saying them more often. You rock her.
I'm going with Stellar. I love you, Stellar.
Just being fucking pussies is all.
Fuck yeah.
All right. On that note, we've totally lost control. I will see you guys tomorrow at our normal 4:00, and then we'll be doing Trump Frog the Pond at 8:30 or 8:15, whenever that is. All right. Take care, guys. Thank you very much. Bye. See ya. Thanks for being here, everybody.